Hi everyone! This is a quick video on one of my favorite poems, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So let's talk about the spelling of the poem. So if you noticed my notification that we were going to read Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Blackboard kept spelling it back to rhyme, which is what we would normally use here because it's a ballad, but technically it should have been rhyme, which I finally fixed, because it means frost. So Coleridge used rhyme because frost forms on the windy side of sails and on ships when you're going through like colder parts or through fog. And so once you read the poem, you'll understand why he uses rhyme in the case of the setting. And then symbolically, the mariner's soul is frosty because he's kind of a colder, more ancient gentleman, and he needs to learn how to have pity on his fellow creatures. Once he does have pity, his soul kind of melts, the frostiness melts away. So that's what rhyme means. So then I said it was a ballad. Not the kind of ballad that maybe Celine Dion would sing. No, this is a British ballad. So these are old school folk tales that Coleridge and his buddy Wordsworth will copy in their book Lyrical Ballads. And so the British ballad is rhymey, lengthy poems about a story. And usually there's a moral to the story. So the ballad is a poem and it's lengthy and it rhymes, and that's why we have Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and it's kind of long, but that's okay. So Coleridge's writing skills. So he kind of smashes together the ballad and the dramatic poem to create this masterpiece. It's considered one of the best poems in the English language. A lyric is dedicated to a personal experience and one's emotions. That's why we call this a lyrical ballad. Then a dramatic poem has characters, a setting, and a moral to the story. So now let's talk about kind of the technical aspect of the poem. When you read it, you will see the stanzas. So there's 4 lines, sometimes more because of creativity purposes and because you don't really want to break up your rhyme scheme because you have to stick to the quatrain. A quatrain, of course, is 4 lines in a stanza. The rhyme scheme is A, B, C, B. So the second and fourth lines rhyme together. And here is an example. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. So notice how still, will, the second and fourth lines rhyme together. The poem is written during the Romantic era, which is much different than the Victorian era that pretty much follows the Romantic era. The picture is Queen Victoria. You can see why the Victorian era would definitely be different than the Romantic. So the Romantic era is focused on nature, your emotions, how you write and express those emotions, and how the individual survives in nature. And so a lot of the poems, not just Coleridge's, but there's plenty, like Christina Rossetti writes Goblin Market, and it's filled with symbolism of nature and what, certain plants mean to the human soul, and the girls wandering through the forest. So I mean, it's all about nature and your emotions. And then in the Victorian era, it's a little more stuffy, and people like Charles Dickens, they're questioning society and talking about how life is quickly changing. So it's very interesting how literature kind of reflects society. So your extra credit assignment for this, and then we'll go back to the poem. I want you to, if you want to, I want you to research the difference between the Romantic era and the Victorian era, and explain what Victorian values are and what Romantic values are, and explain why they don't go hand in hand. Then give examples of some poems and prose. Prose is what we call novels and short stories. For the Victorian and Romantic era, this should be a solid paragraph or 2, but no more than 3. Okay, back to the poem. It's 2 stories in one. So we have the wedding guest and the mariner. And this is told by a narrator with third person limited perspective. So third person meaning, let's pretend two people are talking and you're the third person, but no one knows you're there, but you're kind of explaining how these people are having the conversation. That's what the narrator is doing. But he's the only one who knows the thoughts of the wedding guests. That's the interesting part. And then we have the mariner's story. So the question is the narrator, the older and wiser wedding guest, retelling his story in his run-in with the mariner? So that's the question of the day. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoy the poem. It is a good one.